For this video, we are going to be looking at word problems involving quadratic equations. And so with a quadratic equation, we are going to have something that looks like a parabola, and we're going to be able to apply it to some real-world situations as movement of things that are moving in a parabolic direction. So our first one says a soccer ball is kicked from the ground with an initial upward velocity of 90 feet per second. The equation is h equals negative 16t squared plus 90t. That gives the height of the ball after t seconds. So here we have an equation, a quadratic equation, but we're using h's and t's instead of x and y's. And the h represents the height and the t represents time. So if we have a soccer ball that's being kicked, if I just do a rough drawing, we're going to say that we have a parabola, right? That's how the ball is kicked. And we know the equation for this parabola. And they want to know what is the maximum height of the ball. So the maximum height, if we remember, is going to be where that vertex is. So even though we have h's and t's, we can go ahead and we can figure out what our axis of symmetry is. So for our axis of symmetry, we are going to have t is equal to, rather than x, t is equal to, and it's going to be negative b, which here 90 is our b, so negative 90, over 2 times negative 16. If you recall, our formula for the axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a. So I take negative 90 divided by negative 32, and I get 2.81. We're going to use decimals here. Okay, so that's going to be our time portion of that ordered pair we're trying to figure out here for this vertex. And now to figure out what h is, I want to substitute t back into my original equation, and I'm going to solve for h. So I have h is equal to negative 16 t squared, so that's 2.81 squared, plus 90 times 2.81. And when I simplify that, I get 126.56. You can do that on your calculator. So what is the maximum height? So our vertex here is going to be 2.81 and 126.56. So t, in t seconds, 2.81 seconds, it's going to go 126.56 feet. So that's our answer for the first one, 126.56 feet. That's kind of like what we've been solving for our y value. Here we're just calling it h, and it represents height. Okay, for the next question, it says how many seconds will it take for the ball to reach the ground? So here I know that when the ball reaches the ground, the height is going to be 0. So we're looking for when does h equal 0. So I take my equation and my height, so it's negative 16 t squared plus 90t, and now I know h needs to be 0, so I'm going to set it equal to 0. Now this is not going to factor out easily, so we're going to use our quadratic formula to solve for t here. So we're going to have t is equal to negative b, so that's negative 90, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 90 squared, minus 2 times our a value, which is negative 16, and times c. And in this situation, c is 0. And we're going to divide that all by 2 times a, which is negative 16. So if I just reduce this, I end up with, I'm going to come up here, I end up with t is equal to negative 90 plus or minus the square root of, you're going to do this in your calculator and get 8,100, and that's over negative 32. And then when you simplify that further in your calculator, you're going to get t is equal to, and you have two options, right? So we have negative 90 minus the square root of 8,100 divided by negative 32. And we also have negative 90 minus the square root of 8,100 divided by negative 32. So we want to take our positive answer, which is going to be 5.625, and that means t is equal to 5.625 seconds. That's how many seconds it will take for the ball to reach the ground, or for h to be equal to 0. Alright, our next question says an apple is launched directly upward at 64 feet per second from a platform 80 feet high. The equation for this apple's height, h, at time t seconds after launch is, and they give us the equation, h equals negative 16t squared plus 64t plus 80. So here they've given us the equation, so all we need to do is think through, if something is launched, it says what is the maximum height of the apple. So the maximum height, again, is going to be our vertex. So we want to take our equation and we want to determine what is the vertex of this equation. So the maximum height of the apple, first I'm going to start with my axis of symmetry. So t is going to be equal to negative b, which is negative 64, over 2 times negative 16. That's negative 64 divided by negative 32, so that equals 2. And then I want to find out what my height is, so that'll be the other part of this coordinate. So I know the vertex so far is 2, and now I need to figure out what that h value is. So I'm just going to plug my t value in for h. So that will be negative 16 times 2 squared plus 64 times 2 plus 80, and that is going to equal 144. So our answer for part A is 144 feet. My vertex, that maximum spot, is going to be at the point 2, 144. Okay, the next question says, how many seconds will it take for the apple to reach the ground? So again, for the apple to reach the ground, that means that the height of that apple when it hits is going to be 0. So h is going to equal 0. And so I'm going to take my equation and I'm going to set it equal to 0 because I know h is 0. When I do that, I end up with another factoring kind of problem, and this one we are also going to need to use a quadratic formula for. So I have t is equal to negative b, which is negative 64, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 64 squared, minus 4 times a, which is negative 16, and c, which is 80. And then that all will be over 2 times a, which is negative 16. I'm going to simplify that up here. So t equals negative 64 plus or minus the square root of 9,216. And that's all divided by negative 32. Okay, so now when I take negative 64, and I'm going to add to that the square root of 9,216. I'm going to get 32, and then I'm going to divide that by negative 32, and that gives me an answer of negative 1. And then I also need to do the same thing with adding it. So I'm going to have negative 64, or subtracted it, I'm sorry, I just added it. Negative 64 minus the square root of 9,216. That's going to be negative 160. We're going to divide that by negative 32. You can do all this in your calculator. And the answer there is going to be 5. So because we're not going to have negative 1 seconds, we're not going to utilize that one. So our answer for B is going to be 5 seconds. Number 3 says, in science class, the students were asked to create a container to hold an egg. They would then drop this container from a window 25 feet above the ground. Then they give us the equation, h equals negative 16t squared plus 25. That gives the container's height, h, after t seconds. We want to find, first of all, the maximum height of the container. So this is the same thing. we're looking for our vertex on a parabola. So I want to use my axis of symmetry. So t is equal to, now here we have to be careful, I could rewrite this equation as negative 16t squared plus 0t plus 25 if I wanted to, but we don't usually do that. But that tells me that b is 0. So it's negative b over 2 times a, which is negative 16. And that is going to equal 0. So I know on my vertex here, one of the points is, one of the coordinates is 0, that's t. Now I'm going to substitute that value for t into my equation here for h. So h is equal to negative 16 times 0 squared plus 25, and that equals 25. So that is like my y coordinate, but here we're calling it h. H is 25. So 25 feet would be the answer to part A of this question. And then the next part says, how many seconds will it take for the container to reach the ground? So if the container reaches the ground, the height is equal to 0 again. So you can start to see a pattern in how we're doing these problems. So I'm going to take my equation and I'm going to set it equal to 0 because my h here is 0. And when I go to factor this one, I'm going to use the quadratic formula again. So it's t is equal to, remember b is 0, so we have 0 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 0, minus 4, and then a is negative 16, and then c is 25, and we're going to divide that by 2a, and that's 2 times negative 16. So this ends up being t is equal to 0 plus or minus, this ends up being the square root of 1600 divided by negative 32. Okay, so then we are going to look at this and we need to do 0 plus the square root of 1600. And when we do that, we're going to get 40, and 40 is equal, or 40 divided by negative 32. So we have t is equal to 40 divided by negative 32. That is going to give me a negative 1.25. And then I also want to look at this as 0 minus 1600. So that would be 0 minus 40 divided by negative 32. And so that would be like negative 40 divided by negative 32, which is going to give me a positive 1.25. I can't have negative seconds, so my answer is going to be 1.25 seconds. All right, turn over to the back side. It says a penny is dropped off the Empire State Building, which is 1,250 feet tall. If the penny's pathway can be modeled by the equation h equals negative 16t squared plus 1,250, how long would it take the penny to strike a 6-foot person? All right, so here the key on this is that the height that we are trying to hit here equals 6, because you want it to strike a 6-foot tall person. So the height of the penny needs to be 6 feet. So I'm going to set my equation equal to 6, because I know I want h to be 6. So when I do that, I'm going to subtract the 1,250 from both sides, and so that is going to give me negative 1,244. And then when I divide by negative 16, I'm going to end up with t squared is equal to 77.75. At this point, I just want to take the square root of both of these sides, so that gives me t is equal to, now my answer is going to be plus or minus 8.82. So I can't have negative 8.82 seconds, so my answer needs to be the positive choice, which is just 8.82 seconds. Okay, I would like for you to do number 5 on your own and bring that to class to check. Key word here is you're looking for how long will it take the fireworks to reach the ground. So when you think about the height, you're going to be looking for h is equal to 0 there. All right, I'm going to jump down to number 7. It says Eva is jumping on a trampoline. Her height h at time t can be modeled by the equation. We're given the equation. Would Eva reach a height of 14 feet? So here, what we really need to find out is we need to find out what is the maximum. What's the max height she's going to reach? And then we want to see if it's above 14 or if it's below 14, then we can answer the question. So I want to find the vertex here then. So to find the vertex, I'm going to find my axis of symmetry again. So I have t is equal to negative b, which is negative 20, over 2 times a, which is negative 16. That's going to simplify to 0.625. And now, knowing that this is my vertex or my maximum height, I want to substitute this t in wherever I have a t in my equation. So I have negative 16, sorry, that's a 16, times 0.625 squared plus 20 times 0.625 plus 6. And we're going to find that that equals 12.25. So what that's saying is that my vertex is going to be the point 0.625, that's the time, that many seconds, and we will get to a maximum height of 12.25 feet. So the question is, would Eva reach a height of 14 feet? The answer would be no. The maximum height is 1,225 feet. Sorry, I put a decimal in there. That's be 1,225. No decimal in there. That wouldn't be very high. Okay, so I would like for you to do number 6 and have that checked in class, and then number 8 is optional, and you can work the problem and check it in class if you would like a little bit of a challenge.